5.
I do present every week in the Planet Normal rocket an immense threat to you and any nearby furniture, but I don't think that was particularly proportionate.
4.
And anyone that was coming in the summer of 2024 was going to have a pretty hard time running the UK's national accounts because there's a lot of debt knocking about and money is scarce.
3.
Rachel Reeves' appearance at the CBI. I mean, a bucket of cold sick would have gone down better than our Rachel.
2.
He keeps ringing me up and saying, I'm proud of you. This is very unnerving.
1. We have liftoff.
Welcome once again to Planet Normal, the Telegraph podcast with Alison Pearson.
Hello.
And me, Liam Halligan. Another big week for you and our humble rocket of right thinking, our flying refuge of reasoned views. For the campaign to free the Planet Normal 1 has been a soar-away success. This time last week, you were putting on a brave face, Alison, but underneath that fighting Welsh pit pony exterior, there was a deeply shocked and frightened little lamb. Properly frightened, being publicly accused of genuine nastiness that's absolutely not in your character, living under the threat of arrest and even jail. Why? Because as is now well known, earlier this month, the morning of Remembrance Sunday no less, Essex police turned up on your doorstep in uniform, shouting the legal odds about a year-old tweet you posted then quickly deleted, which they then alleged may have stirred up racial hatred. Cue a wave of outrage as legal experts, former prime ministers, MPs from various parties and Elon Musk no less came out in support of you, amidst a fierce debate about free speech and a waste of police resources. How could this happen, some of the world's leading newspapers opined, in Britain, the home of Magna Carta, that citadel of free speech? Last week's Planet Normal was a stark demonstration of the level of public outrage at your plight. And just a few hours after it was released, an email popped into your lawyer's inbox from Essex Police. No further action in the Pearson case. Essex Police deny any wrongdoing and stress they've acted properly throughout. But there will be many, many people across the UK and elsewhere, Alison, keen to hear your thoughts. There's lots more to talk about. There are some other things going on in the world apart from Pearson Gate. Although I have to say, I am wondering now who's going to be playing me in the movie. You, of course, will be played by Renée Zellweger, which will please regulars in your local The King's Arms, because that's what they already call you anyway. And in another plus for Planet Normal, the excellent Jay Bhattacharya, Stanford professor turned lockdown skeptic, has been appointed as head of America's National Institutes of Health by incoming President Donald Trump. When he spoke with me on Planet Normal in June 21 and with you in December 2022, Jay Bhattacharya was something of an outcast. Well, now he's going to be running the world's biggest government-funded biomedical research entity. And huge congratulations to him. This has also been the week when a petition emerged for another general election. It now has 2.5 million signatures. That's getting on for 1 in 10 of those who voted in last July's election, and more than 1 in 4 of those who voted Labour. Then there's the ongoing drumbeat of discontent from countless British farmers, now facing inheritance tax, threatening the viability of small farms, and of course inflation's up, growth is stagnant, and Rachel from Accounts, our Chancellor of the Exchequer, is coming under serious pressure. But Alison, a huge few days for you. Why don't you sum up how you feel about Planet Normal listeners and others who supported you so staunchly during an episode which many, rightly in my view, have described as Kafkaesque?
Well, co-pilot, I mean, I'm hugely relieved, but I'm sure you're hugely relieved that you weren't going to have a lonely vigil outside Chelmsford Police HQ in your Free the Pearson 1.
I had my thermos flask ready, my Derry boots.
Yeah, I said in the column this week, I thought we'd have had the politest riot in world history, wouldn't we, really? And lots of Planet Normal listeners said they would indeed turn up. So yes, as you described, Liam, my lawyer, Luke Gittus, who came via the excellent Free Speech Union, which has been providing much needed support and guidance, Luke had suggested last Wednesday that we should engage with the police. Now, I was struggling with it, Liam, because on the one hand, you think, do I actually have to dignify this absolutely preposterous allegation, which I was obviously very, very upset about and indeed angry about, because as we know, some anonymous person, aka the victim, as I was told to call them, could have anything against anybody and literally call up the police and say they were offended by something. So I didn't particularly want to engage in this, particularly as the non-crime hate incident, which is what Sussex police had recorded last year against me for a tweet, which was very much to do with two-tier policing of the pro-Palestine marches and, as I saw it, the ignoring of flagrant anti-Semitism. But this person had made an inquiry and I was on the hook for what Essex police had decided, somewhat mystifyingly, I think we can say confidently, was now escalated to an offence under the Public Order Act, stirring up racial hatred. I should say to listeners that the guidance which Suella Braverman, when she was the Home Secretary, had made statutory about handling non-crime hate incidents was very much telling police that they should exercise common sense and really only approach somebody if there was a threat of violent disorder, which, as we know, co-pilot, is never far from your concerns about me.
You're always one column away from violent disorder.
One column away from violent disorder. Actually, can I just say, I was thinking earlier, I'll be really glad when we get through this period where you're being nice to me and sympathetic.
I'm always nice to you.
No, I think the minute that you return to ribald rudeness, I will feel I'm clear. Finally, I'm clear.
Normal service has been resumed.
Say to listeners, he keeps ringing me up and saying, I'm proud of you. This is very unnerving.
What does he mean by that?
What does he mean by that? So, lovely solicitor Luke said, Alison, I think we should volunteer to go in for a voluntary interview, which the police said was suggested to me on the doorstep. I didn't hear that part, but I was a bit anxious. So he said there is a very remote chance that they could come and arrest you if you don't go in for a voluntary interview. So I didn't really want to put the family and the pets. I think the cockapoo would have been horrified if police took mummy away in handcuffs. So Luke, the solicitor, emailed Essex police saying Miss Pearson will come in for her voluntary interview. And then we didn't hear that next day. And he said he thought the silence was quite interesting. And then he got an email from a pretty senior officer who said, NFA, no further action. And that was on really late Thursday afternoon. And it was an extraordinary moment of relief, elation. Other feelings have landed. I mean, I go up and down, still kind of slightly resonating like a struck gong after the event. I mean, I think I get very angry. I want an explanation. And so far, we've had nothing from Essex police to in any way justify this absolutely extraordinary behaviour, which, as you said in your introduction, Liam, we've had some of the most senior legal minds in the land. We've had senior police officers, KCs and former Home Secretaries weighing in and saying that with my supposedly offensive tweet that it did not come near the threshold for criminal investigation. So Reader's Telegraph subscribers will know that in my column today, we're recording on Wednesday, I set a list of questions for the Chief Constable of Essex. And I mean, just to give you a bit of a flavour, who thought it was appropriate to send 2 officers to my house on Remembrance Sunday? Why was my original non-crime hate incident escalated to a criminal investigation? Who thought it was a credible charge when so many others say there was no case at all? Why did Essex police say it was unethical for me to write about my deeply upsetting experience? Now, this is quite interesting, Liam, that it seems, allegedly, that the police had confirmed to The Guardian which tweet of mine had been found offensive.
Something they wouldn't tell you.
And the identity of my accuser, who spoke to The Guardian. But the Telegraph tried to ask the police for these details and was told they couldn't be disclosed. And also a transcript of my doorstep conversation with the two officers was leaked to the Sunday Times.
Heavily redacted.
Heavily redacted.
So only leaving in the bits that made you look bad, you feel?
Yeah, or...
And it's their version.
Implied that I had lied. I think it was a clear attempt to discredit my account. And this is not an excuse, Liam, but when you've got coppers on the doorstep, you know, your brain is doing at least two different things. It's partly listening to them and partly it's thinking, oh my God, what's going on?
Just to say, the police, for non-journalists, the police also reported the Telegraph to IPSA, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, thus landing a lot of our colleagues with a lot of bureaucracy, right? These IPSA referrals, that they really take up a lot of managerial time in order to try and put pressure on you from within your own newspaper. Bad mistake.
Bad mistake. And I think that, again, coming back to wanting an explanation, instead of apologising for what Labour MP Graham Stringer called in the House of Commons the Stasi-like behaviour of Essex police, why did they double down in apparently a further attempt to scare and silence me, announcing, co-pilot, that Gold Command was taking over my now massive Brinks-Mat robbery case? I mean,
that's the police equivalent of scrambling Cobra.
It really is. And as we've discussed, I do present every week in the Planet Normal Rocket an immense threat to you and any nearby furniture. But I don't think that was particularly proportionate. So I've asked the Chief Constable, do you feel proud of using police powers to scare a law-abiding middle-aged woman when people in our county of Essex can't get your attention for actual crimes? So I could go on, and I'm interested whose decision it was to declare no further action, because my solicitor's theory is that the CPS, that's the Crown Prosecution Service, told the police there wasn't a chance in hell of obtaining a conviction because no one in their right mind had thought that my tweet came even close to inciting hatred, a tweet which, by the way, was rapidly deleted when it was pointed out that I was discussing a photograph which had been taken some time before. So, yes, I mean, those are some of my questions to Essex Police, and a very crack team of solicitors will now be getting all the information that Essex Police has with my name on it. So some of those answers, hopefully, will be swiftly forthcoming. But I think something I want to say, Liam, is actually that what this did show was not only was I personally fortunate to have the Telegraph and Chris Evans, the editor, his personal backing, saying it was totally outrageous.
Hear, hear.
But what then happened is that this amazing media organisation did what it does best. It swung into action and it started investigating Essex Police, rather than they were doing a lot better investigation than Essex Police generally manages to do. And every single day they found some new aspect of the story. We had very senior policemen, retired, Lord Hogan Howe, this last couple of days, Lord Sumption, former Supreme Court judge, all of them coming forward and saying that these non-crime hate incidents were pretty dreadful. Lord Sumption said that they were just basically a vehicle for people with a grudge. So the Telegraph turned what was my, as you know, personal distress, but not just indulging me as a columnist, but making this now shining an unforgiving spotlight on the extraordinary behaviour of the police, which millions of British people don't want the police basically running around in snitch Britain, behaving like the Stasi.
700 of these things Essex did last year, non-crime hate incident reports. 700. That's one police jurisdiction in the country.
Yeah.
Think of the police time.
Policy Research Group actually published a report on Monday saying that 60,000 hours of police time is given to non-crime hate incidents every year. I would be very surprised if it was that little.
And when you get burgled, they don't even turn up.
No.
Crazy. No. Not always, but often. often.
Well, I haven't heard of anyone who's had a burglary investigated. So what I've done, Liam, is again trying to turn something really very difficult into something positive. Is I have said to the readers, and I'm now saying to Planet Normal listeners, if anyone either has or knows of anyone who has a non-crime hate incident against their name, to get in touch with me. And I'm in close contact with Toby Young, founder of the Free Speech Union, and we're doing a sort of pincer movement, really. So we are going to give massive support to anyone who wants to push back. And I'm encouraging everyone to ask their local police to do a subject access request, which will tell you basically if you have one of these ghastly things against your name. I should say, Liam, actually, that not just in the UK, but this internationally, this made headlines, your co-pilot's persecution.
It's the only chance you've ever got of getting in the Wall Street Journal.
It's absolutely.
Oh, no. Now you're a major global expert in international bond markets. I'll give you a joint byline.
I'm not going to tell you what a bond market is, but I do know that things are quite bad when they're crossed with the government. But yeah, the Wall Street Journal, major American newspaper, carried the headline, Britain police's speech, but not much else. The British Bobby, previously armed with only a nightstick and common decency, has become an Orwellian snooper. And Elon Musk, my new best friend, called the UK a tyrannical police state. Now, I'd suggest, Liam, that this is not doing our international reputation any good at all. So, yeah, just to sum up, still feeling pretty battered in some ways, but very determined now that I'm going to really dedicate myself to having non-crime hate incidents banned. I think there's a great crest of support for hate incidents in general to be removed because they're covered very well by other more robust legislation. I should make the point, Liam, that the NCHIs, they're not law. They were invented by the College of Policing. And there's so much discretion around their exercise that, you know, you could get lucky if you were in one county or unlucky if you were in another. And I'm very much hoping, we've already had Reform Party, Nigel Farage has said that if they were in power, they would scrap them. And I'm really hoping that Kemi Badenoch, who was one of the people who was immensely supportive to me over the last fortnight, I'd really like to see the Conservatives now doing this Conservative thing and saying this is something we would commit to getting rid of, because I do feel there is cross-party consensus.
There's huge amounts of politics around this. The current Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, was saying until quite recently she wanted to make these NCHIs even more ubiquitous.
Yes.
And even more prevalent. I think she's now changing her tune. Mm-hmm. Everybody should read your column on this in this week's Telegraph, linked to the show notes in this episode. And we should say to Planet Normal listeners, before we move on, we've decided to break the format of 227 episodes and counting. We're not going to have a guest this week because we're going to devote the time to an extended treatment of the thousands of emails that we've had from Planet Normal listeners at the end of this episode. But there's other stuff going on. There's this petition.
Yes.
Which has really captured the public's imagination. Some people would say, oh, it's only 2.5 million. It's a bit mad. The election was only in July. I think 4 or 5 million people signed a petition to revoke Article 50, didn't they? People who backed Remain in the referendum in June 2016, who were upset about Brexit. That didn't make any difference. I have to say, though, it does point to a shifting national mood, and it does really highlight what we've been saying on Planet Normal since immediately after that election in early July. This Labour majority, it's a mile wide, but it's an inch deep.
Yeah, well, I signed. I bet quite a few of our listeners signed as well, because someone sent it to me and I signed. And I have to say, Liam, there's not a huge amount to be cheerful about at the moment, but it was very cheering to see the numbers going up. They were ticking up. every few minutes they would just suddenly go up. And what the petition was saying was calling for another general election, which obviously is not going to happen. But it was saying that Labour had got in on a false prospectus, that they had lied. So that was why, in fact, it's a West Midlands pub landlord who was, like many small business owners, very, very upset with what he saw as an assault on his business, how it's going to hit all these rises in the minimum wage, plus the rise, of course, in the employer's national insurance contribution, which is going to cause huge pain to businesses, large and small. So the chap who started this petition was just very, very aggrieved. And I think he literally spoke for millions, didn't he? And we've seen this week, we saw, actually, if you want to laugh, I can recommend looking up Rachel Reeves' appearance at the CBI. I mean, a bucket of cold sick would have gone down better than our Rachel. Rachel from Accounts, bless her, who sat on the stage and explained to the stony-faced audience that, don't worry, we won't have another budget that's as nasty to you as this one, with a placated co-pilot.
I think a lot of business so-called leaders, though I have to say the people that hang around the CBI tend to be sort of corporate politicians rather than actual entrepreneurs. I think a lot of the business world were keen to embrace Rachel Reeves. Obviously, Labour were very far ahead in the opinion polls. And on paper, she's a pretty credible person. It now turns out, if you don't look at her CV too closely, and anyone that was coming in the summer of 2024 was going to have a pretty hard time running the UK's national accounts, because there's a lot of debt knocking about and money is scarce. On the other hand, I do think that she has made it a lot worse for herself, a lot more difficult. And Michael Westwood, the Midlands publican, as you said, who launched this petition, who's well on the way to becoming a sort of trivial pursuit question, and chapeau to him just for exercising his democratic right in such a prominent way. He really captures a mood across the business community, and the mood, and indeed across some other voters too, the mood that Labour didn't say, or was actually even a little bit disingenuous or worse about what it was going to do. No taxes on working people. Well, a rise in employer national insurance is a tax on jobs. It's as simple as that. And even neutral, independent economists at places like the IFS and elsewhere would agree with that. No inheritance tax on farmland. That's what Labour told the NFU conference before the election, and that may explain why they were successful in getting so many rural seats, which they may not have got had they been more honest about that. So the inheritance tax thing also will hit owners of companies, and many small companies, family-owned businesses. There are 5 million of them in the UK. They are the backbone of our economy. These small and medium-sized enterprises that employ about 2/3 of all people, half of our GDP, they are going to be really threatened by this inheritance tax, because I won't go through the numbers, but I've talked to lots of accountants about it. If somebody dies who's a share owner of a family business, and the business has to pay a hefty inheritance tax bill, those businesses will just sell rather than carrying on into the next generation. And these are often very, very important local employers. So I think Rachel Reeves very much has her work cut out, and that's being polite about it, in order to try and establish credibility at this point among a lot of business leaders. And while I think she's making some moves which are making life a lot more difficult to get growth going, she said growth, that word, 31 times in her budget. And yet the OBR itself, the official fiscal watchdog, the Office of Budget Responsibility, admitted in the fine print that her budget measures would have very little positive impact on growth, even though it was promoted as a pro-growth budget. And many other observers, including me, concluded almost instantly that it would actually undermine growth. And on the macro side, the big picture economy, we've had a sharp increase in inflation to 2.3%, going up above target again. What we've been talking about on Planet Normal, that there wouldn't be as many interest rate cuts this year as everyone was suggested, that has now almost certainly come true. There almost certainly won't be an interest rate cut in December. That's what financial markets are saying. And again, so much of economic outcomes are determined globally. It is very, very difficult for politicians to really steer a ship when it's bobbing around on the sort of tumultuous sea of global economics, to say nothing of geopolitics. But I do think she's made the situation a lot worse. And again, as we said, early doors in this Labour government, a lot of her tax changes, they may not come up with much money, if any money, VAT on independent schools, but they are ideological. She seems to be making tax moves to please the left of her party rather than doing what's right for the British economy, getting growth going, getting prosperity moving, rescuing us finally from this ghastly cost of living crisis.
Oh, yes, co-pilot. Don't worry, they're fixing the foundations. The foundations will be fixed any minute now. So we saw some fixing the foundations this week.
That's what you say when I ring you up and say, why don't we go for a drink, Alison? Oh, I'm just at home. I'm fixing my foundation, as she applies some makeup.
Exactly. Yeah, slapping on the old Charlotte Tilbury. But, you've just given a very learned and reasoned overview of it. Seems to me like it's just a clown car.
It's nice to get a word in.
Well, I know. Yeah, we talked about my predicament for 30 seconds. But it is just a clown car. So just at the beginning of this week, actually it was very funny, one of the listeners said, so Starmer was out and about on the airwaves saying that the perpetrators of spiking will feel the full force of the law. And Melanie emailed me saying that when I first saw that, I thought Starmer said perpetrators of speaking, and I wasn't even surprised. So, and Keir Starmer was announcing this clampdown on spiking of drinks, which was already law. This is a former DPP.
Yeah. They're just trying to shift the news agenda away from stuff
honestly,
they don't.
I just think
it's a really important subject, of course, kids getting their drinks spiked. I mean, we've talked about it a lot on Planet Normal in the past.
Yes, I know, but literally now. And then you think, well, to me, it's the epic cluelessness of them. It really is. And I think it goes beyond ideological differences, because obviously I disagree with many of the things that they want to introduce. But if they showed any sign of doing them competently, but that brings us, doesn't it, Liam, to one of our big preoccupations on Planet Normal, which is Mad Ed Miliband, who you've decided to call Dick Ed Miliband, which I think is actually quite good, and who went to the COP29. I'm not sure how much of our money Ed has committed to the 300 billion that the developed world is giving out to dictators in third world countries. But no doubt we're on the hook for something. But what we've been saying on Planet Normal for a long time is that these net zero targets enshrined in law, with 2 people and a dog in the House of Commons when it happened, net zero targets of 2030, 2035 and 2050 are not just unattainable with the present technology and at the present pace of the necessary infrastructure, but actively ruinous. And Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, who I quite like actually, but he said, I have been clear that decarbonisation must not mean deindustrialisation. I've got a message for Mr. Reynolds. Decarbonisation very much means disindustrialisation.
That's exactly the phrase used by Frances O'Grady, who runs the TUC, the Trade Unions Congress. She said in the first TUC conference since Labour came to power in 14 years, decarbonisation must not mean deindustrialisation. And yet, what are we seeing? We're seeing a ban on all drilling in the North Sea. That's tens of thousands of jobs, and they're good jobs, often jobs for people who come from parts of the country where there aren't that many good, well-paid jobs, with all respect. Think of the, hundreds of thousands of people that work in our energy complex, our oil and gas complex. Their jobs are under threat. And now, of course, we must mention it. Stellantis, which is the world's fourth biggest car group. It's not a household name. It's a kind of conglomerate that includes famous names like Chrysler, Citroën, Fiat, Peugeot, and Vauxhall. They've announced, and they did this on the day of the major industry car conference and dinner for Maximum Impact, after nearly 120 years as a driving force in that proud Bedfordshire town of Luton, Vauxhall Motors is closing down their van making factory in Luton. Stellantis say the jobs will go to Ellesmere Port. We'll have to see, certainly fingers and toes crossed. But it's pretty difficult if you live and work in Luton, if you've got a family in Luton, to suddenly move to Merseyside. And why? Stellantis made a point in their press release of stressing rules that mean petrol and diesel cars will be banned in this country by 2035, in line with the rest of the European Union, a date that Labour wants to bring forward to 2030. And Ed Miliband seems to have absolutely pinned that 2030 date to his chest with a safety pin. But even though the date is still 2035, as we have highlighted on Planet Normal many times, the rules are already impacting the car industry. We had Robert Forrester, who runs Virtue Motors. Go back in the Planet Normal archive and you will hear an incredibly prescient interview, if I say so myself, with a chap who runs one of the biggest car retailing empires in Britain. He really put his head above the parapet. People in the industry gave him a hard time about it. It was the 11th of September, 2024, Planet Normal episode 2116. That was like Captain's Log, Stardate. There was a bit of William Shatner there. You could be Uhuru, as long as I can be Leonard Nimoy. But Robert told us that already car makers were rationing the manufacture of petrol and diesel cars because unless they were selling 25% of their cars as EVs, they would get fined for each petrol and diesel car that they produced, 15 grand, which of course made making the car completely economically non-viable. But they couldn't sell enough EVs to hit the target, which has already come in. It comes in increments in the run-up to 2035 or 2030 or whatever it's going to be. So you already had petrol and diesel cars, in the words of Robert Forrester, and I tip my hat to him, another Planet Normal alumnus, just like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He said petrol and diesel cars were being rationed because punters were not buying EVs. And why weren't they buying EVs? Because the charging network isn't there, because the range that's stipulated by the manufacturers is often, shall we say, rather larger than the range in practice. Some of those manufacturers will deny that. But there's a general feeling among motorists, even motorists who desperately want to be part of the net zero agenda, that EVs just aren't up to it. And I've been saying for years, EVs are a blind alley. They are not the solution. The batteries are too heavy. The physics of this does not work. The batteries rely on rare earths. China, by the way, has 90% of the production capacity for those rare earths in the world. If we go ahead with this ban on petrol and diesel cars, Ed Miliband, and I hope you're listening, we will destroy our car making industry because China now produces 60% of all EVs in the world. They're massively, massively subsidized. They've got access to all the rare earth minerals you need for the batteries. And our entire car making industry, which still employs upward of 1 million people, by the way, will be completely wrecked. And look what's happening in Germany, the heart of the Eurozone, the heart of the European Union's economy, one of the biggest economies in the world. And yet German car makers are getting absolutely mullered, their profits destroyed. There's a lot to be said for moving away from fossil fuels. I had a long conversation about this with Anthony Bamford, who runs JCB. They don't make cars, but JCB is absolutely at the forefront of anyone in the world when it comes to producing alternative fuels. They do an incredible job, as well as making, very, very iconic diggers and agricultural machinery. There's lots to be said for moving away from fossil fuels, but to just impose a date, for politicians to impose a date so they can look cool in front of their kids and on the international circuit set and maybe get themselves lucrative green sector jobs once they fail in government and have to leave, and just imposing this on the British economy, whether it's your household utility bills, whether it's your car, its manufacturing complex, our energy complex. It's madness. It's madness to not consider the practicalities of net zero. And I'm not having a debate here about global warming and being a climate skeptic or not. I'm saying there's lots of good reasons to use alternative fuels and wean ourselves off fossil fuels, which will eventually run out. But to just impose these targets and expect the plebs to just make it happen, and if they don't make it happen, or if they pipe up about their suffering, then you just keep hammering them over the head and call them deplorables or climate deniers in a grotesque use of language. This is going to be a major backlash about this, and I say this with regret. And I do think Port Talbot, about which you spoke so eloquently, it's a town very close to your heart. You've got family who work in Port Talbot, closing down of one of the last blast furnaces in the UK, and now something as iconic as the Vauxhall Luton van factory. This is serious stuff, Ed. I hope you know what you're doing, but I really don't think you do.
I think everyone now should be really angry with this because, as you said, Liam, Miliband and others are prisoners of ideology. That's what bringing forward this target for EVs to 2030 is all about. It's absolutely insane green grandstanding. And one thing I know from speaking to some of the most eminent academics and engineers in the country, professors of engineering, professors of chemistry, is there is no way that our national grid would be ready by 2030 to power all these EVs that Miliband has got in his head. So I can't think of another time. And people have pointed out that all of our great leaps forward as a nation, the Industrial Revolution, came about because we had the technology and then we made the leap. This is us literally being asked to leap before the technology is ready. I cannot think of anything crazier, and it is going to cost, not only is it going to cost hundreds of thousands of jobs, talking to North Sea divers, talking to people in engineering, supply chains, absolutely ruinous for our country. And I think it will, in fact, I pray it will bring down the Labour government. It will lead to strikes. Let's hope it doesn't end in civil disorder, but it well might. And boy, would they deserve it, because to play so fast and loose with the working people of this country with the highest electricity prices in the developed world, absolutely insane. Can we, before we move to the Alison Pearson email fest, can we just have a couple of minutes?
I've just got my packed lunch ready before we go on this journey.
You had your little canvas foldable stool ready for the vigil outside the Chelmsford Police Headquarters, didn't you?
I went to visit a friend the other day.
In Chelmsford Jail.
No, and I took a flask of my little canvas stool and I got the piss taken out of me.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I know you've shed some pounds, Halligan, but you on a little canvas stool. That's asking a lot of a little canvas stool.
I didn't even get it out the back of the Defender. I was so embarrassed.
Let's lift our spirits. So the wonderful news that our friend, and we're great fans of Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, appointed, as you said.
What a brave man.
Appointed by President-elect Trump in an inspired appointment to be the director of the National Institutes of Health. Now this, Liam, I think is almost a fairy tale reversal of fortunes. You'll remember that Jay, with Martin Kulldorff on our own wonderful Professor Sunetra Gupta, was one of 3 authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, which called for an end to COVID lockdowns.
Which Google tried to suppress. They deny that.
Yeah, but the Great Barrington suggested the use of focused protection, which would be to keep vulnerable groups safe during COVID. Now, 4 days after Great Barrington, Anthony Fauci and the then director of the NIH, Francis Collins, emailed each other. These emails are now in the public domain to plot a devastating takedown of the Great Barrington's premises. And not long after that, Twitter, now that's the pre-Elon Musk pro-censorship Twitter, put Jay Bhattacharya on a blacklist to prevent his tweets from trending.
Disgusting. This guy is a professor at Stanford. He's one of the top epidemiologists in the world, as is, of course, Sunetra Gupta of Oxford And Martin Kulldorff, formerly of Harvard, he's actually left Harvard, and that's another story. And it was, wasn't it? The Great Barrington Declaration, it wasn't denying COVID. It wasn't anti-vax. It was saying, look, we think we can get as much protection for people without locking down entire economies. That was what it was about. Think of the damage that's been incurred. Had the Great Barrington Declaration been listened to, so many of the mental health problems of kids, schools wouldn't have needed to close, the NHS wouldn't have needed to close down, you wouldn't have had a dearth of cancer referrals. So now, tragically, you've got young people who've got cancer because they weren't screened, because the NHS became a COVID-only service. Absolutely outrageous. Jay Bhattacharya was at the forefront, as was Planet Normal. We hosted him, didn't we, in mid-2021 when he was an outcast.
Yeah.
We hosted him. And then again in 2022. Had they been listened to, then so much human suffering that has happened would not have happened.
I should make the point, actually, to everyone who now delights in calling this right-wing conspiracy theorists. Shunetra certainly, and I'm confident Jay as well. Shunetra Gupta's perspective, she is an old-style lefty, really.
Yeah.
Shunetra's concern...
She's used those words to us in our presence, hasn't she?
Her concern was that the poor of the world, the poorest people, were going to get it in the neck, really, from this mad lockdown. And she wasn't wrong about that. So they were really far from shilling for Big Pharma, which was what some of the people in the other administration were doing. These were honest, decent, among some of the best people you could meet, really. But Liam, let's just ponder this delicious irony. So this guy, a world authority in public health, who was censored and defamed by the US administration, is about to become its leading healthcare director. And I just want to say, compare now, I think what's going on in the States under Trump in terms of energy, honesty about various things, and COVID is going to provide a very, very painful contrast with what's going on here, where the UK COVID inquiry, which lumbers on expensively, futilely, still wondering whether lockdown could have been imposed sooner and for longer. Meanwhile, in the United States, one of their leading figures will now be Jay, who absolutely says lockdown was the worst public health measure in human history.
Now on to our listener emails. Your messages sent to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming. We'd love to hear from you, the citizens of Planet Normal. And it's a very, very special week. As we said at the top of this podcast, we're not having a guest this week. Not that we don't love our Planet Normal guests, we do. But we're devoting the rest of this episode to trying to represent, trying to pay credit to the literally thousands and thousands of emails that have been sent to us, to Planet Normal, in light of Alison's case. Co-pilot, over to you. I'm just going to go and make a cup of tea, okay?
Don't worry, we'll be back to talking about you next week. Don't worry.
There's some very interesting economic trends, by the way. And the link to my Lord Bamford interview is in the show notes to this episode.
You know, the irony is you would have made a much better, pluckier free speech martyr than me.
What, some hairy 6'4" bloke? I don't think so. You're perfect. A diminutive, blonde, middle-aged lady with a reputation for being, measured and demure. Sorry, that last bit isn't actually true, but the rest of it is.
No, measured and demure, not two words that cling to my persona. Yeah, I just want to say that I really was sustained hugely by your lovely messages and correspondence. So I think we always feel we're a sort of Planet Normal family, but no more so than at this juncture. So we have had, Liam, some astonishing people, listeners and readers, writing in now to seek help along the lines of the help that I have received. And this is a story that came in this morning. And this is from Anna. That's not her real name for reasons that will become obvious. I'm 42 and I've never had a run-in with the police in my life. We're a military family and as of today have fallen out of love with Great Britain. Yesterday, me, my husband and teenage daughter were out on a hack with our horses. It was idyllic, sunny and cold. To cut a long story short, 2 men came past us at high speed, causing my daughter's pony to spook and almost fall down into a ditch. The driver and passenger then launched themselves from the vehicle and went for our daughter. My husband jumped from his horse to intercept the men, and he was pushed by one of them. He pushed the man back, and the man went to his vehicle and picked up either a knife or a screwdriver. I phoned 999, says Anna, pleading for help. And in the following 30 minutes, my horse was reversed into by the man. My husband's horse lost a shoe, and my daughter was crying and in pieces. We were all yelling at the men to go away, but they proceeded to come up to us. In my terror and rage, I screamed the word pikey at them, says Anna, for no other reason that they were behaving so dreadfully and we were all frightened for our safety. I even apologised to the man, as this enraged him, as it turned out he was a member of the local gypsy community. The police eventually arrived 35 minutes later, came to our home to take a statement. They were polite and sympathetic, but said they were doubtful of getting a prosecution against the men, even though they were known locally, as it's our word against theirs. But, wait for this co-pilot, because I called them pikeys and it's recorded on my 999 call, I'm now invited to an interview under caution. I'm not under arrest, but I will be questioned under caution. I'm so scared. This is not my world. We were being attacked and now I am at fault. This doesn't seem right. Am I going mad? Alison, you've got common sense in spades, so please tell me if I am going mad. I have joined the Free Speech Union and asked them to help me. I'm not even sure if they can. I have to go to the interview under caution on Friday. That's tomorrow, Planet Normal listeners. But I just don't want to go. If you have the time to give me any help, I'd be so grateful. Kindest regards from a long-standing admirer of your work. Now, Liam, I just want to say that indeed my solicitor, who helps the Free Speech Union, Luke, is going to go with Anna to this deranged police interview, as some might say. And I think that story for me, even more so perhaps than my own story, sums up the madness of these hate crime incidents. A family, a law-abiding, lovely family in our country were out. They had their lovely day in the country, disturbed by people who frightened them. And the result of that alleged assault and terror was that Anna, 42-year-old mum, is now going into the police station to account for using one word out of place for a community that belongs to a, quotes, protected characteristic. Stasi Britain.
Couple from me, and again, I can only convey there are thousands and thousands of these emails. Yeah, we could have a 10-hour Planet Normal and we wouldn't get through them. Perish the thought. Then I would get my flask out.
Can we do it with a bumper bottle of Baileys? Come on, Cass and Izzy would be on for it. We could just really go. We could go for it, girls, couldn't we? It'd be great.
Well, there's a few Planet Normals till Christmas, so let's see how we get on. Anthony says, I've been a Met police officer for 24 years, also depressing. We've lost our way completely, and this incident with Alison has caused so much hate and anger against the police. I feel embarrassed, says Anthony, to tell people my job now. And Jill, dearest Alison, yes, I feel I know you so well. I can be on first name terms. Blood pressure pills, who needs them? When you can read your articles on a Wednesday. My word, the boys in blue, what on earth has happened to them? Now, whatever the outcome of your little fracas, you will always be welcome in our little corner of Fermanagh. Yes, we've declared independence. My husband has one simple request. Could you bring your friend, Liam Halligan? But not your best friend anymore, it turns out, because Elon's got a bigger rocket. The next few months are going to take a financial toll on us. We have so many protests to attend, the farmers, Save Alison, etc. The upside, we feel so young and full of life. Just like our predecessors who went off to fight for our freedom, we must replicate for our children. Chin up, Alison. Keep up the good fight. Next government, here we go. Andrew Neil, Clarkson, Nigel Farage, led by Alison Pearson. We're right behind you. Jill and her right-hand man, Wesley.
Oh.
And this is Ron. I sent Essex Police and Crime Commissioner Roger Hurst an email telling him he got my vote to hold the police to account. His reply, We only do 700 of those out of thousands of complaints. I replied, 1 is too many. 700 is ridiculous. All the very best. Ron, I've joined, he says, the Free Speech Union.
Fantastic. This is from Annalise. Dear Alison and Liam, having listened to your podcast, I just had to write. Alison, I love everything you ever write. Oh, that's very kind. You made me feel heard, listened to, and valuable. Right now, have never felt so proud of someone I don't know. Oh, no, I'm going to cry now, Liam. Hold on. I love your passion and felt every word that I just heard. The way you spoke is the way I hear myself speak sometimes. That real belief, that emotion, the desperation for people to open their eyes and see what is happening. Many won't, though, and even in my own kitchen, I sometimes have to allow myself to be silenced. I hate that you have had to endure this, and I can hear that it's taken its toll. But my God, woman, you are a queen, as my daughters would say. We now know that they've dropped your case, but you have, as you said, done good, and in years to come, we will remember this moment and Alison Pearson for her courage, resilience and integrity. Things that the spiteful, witchly mateless wouldn't recognise if they bit her on a stuck-up Holland Park nose. Crikey.
Emily, of course, denies all wrongdoing.
Stay strong, Alison, but also ask for hugs. So many of us are right with you and are ever grateful for your talent and all the nice words that she's giving us. Kindness. I hope I'm kind. I hope I'm kind, Annalise, because the police didn't think I was kind. And yes, I do know that's your kindness is there, even though we've never met. Absolute best wishes, Annalise.
This is from Nick. Dear Alison and Liam, first, congratulations, Alison, on your victory over the mad and bad Essex police force, who deny wrongdoing. Even though your head says you've done nothing wrong, such is the state of our judicial decision makers, we can never be sure what crazy decision they will inflict. Best to be a criminal and get away with it, rather than a law-abiding citizen used as cannon fodder by a state intent on indoctrination of the DEI religion. That's diversity, equity and inclusion. Actually, says Nick, I wanted to confess that I did sign the petition for a rerun of the general election. I did feel a hypocrite as I voted to leave the EU and was scathing of those like Keir Starmer who wanted another referendum. However, my reason was simple. I wanted a debate in Parliament over the question of what does a general election manifesto actually mean, and does it now have any legitimacy as a document of intent by a political party? It seemed to me that apart from the promise to raise VAT on private schools, the rest of the Labour manifesto was a pack of lies and deliberately intended to mislead the electorate into a false sense of security that Labour had changed. Therefore, this government can have no legitimacy or right to govern with just 20% of the electorate voting Labour at the general election. So I think it is vital Parliament debates what responsibility a party has to the manifesto it offers to the public and what sanctions should be available to stop contentious tax and spend legislation not revealed to the electorate at the time of voting. This situation has never arisen in my memory of elections, and unless there's a vigorous debate in Parliament or a binding review of what a manifesto represents, our parliamentary system of government by consent is no longer fit for purpose. Very best wishes for a peaceful Christmas and keep up your vital podcast, says Nick. And this is from Richard, a long-time Planet Normal listener. Alison and Liam, what a week. You can say that again. But first, my apologies to Liam for the hate speech reference to his Irish roots. Please, please, please don't dob me in. And second, the news of Essex Police finding a degree of common sense, usually anything but common these days, and dropping charges even though no crime was committed against Alison. You must be so relieved. And lastly, a huge thanks for both reading out my terrible old McStarmer ditty. You'll be happy and relieved, that was last week's email of the week, to hear I've killed him off after just one appearance. Unless I have a Bobby's dream moment, reference to Dallas kids, that will be the last we hear of him from me. If only I could say the same about the real Starmer. Whatever, I digress. Alison, thanks for choosing me as mug winner. In a week when I'm sure you had so many more serious, appropriate, important and better emails, I'm honoured that you chose mine. And thanks so much for keeping me sane these last few years, especially during the government's reaction to COVID. Now, with a tough, mad, poverty-stricken, all of the previous 4.5 years ahead of us, we need Planet Normal more than ever. Thanks both so much. And I look forward to receiving my rare as rocking horse poo Planet Normal mug. Cheers, Richard. P.S. Get Musk on the rocket. PS2, have a Planet Normal event up north.
Oh,
now
up
there's
north.
an idea.
Yeah, I
There are
know.
lots of us right-minded thinkers up here as well.
We'd love to have an event up north. We'll definitely look at that for next year. Now, Liam, we've had a lot of policemen, both serving and retired, coming forward. You quoted Anthony earlier, many excellent coppers who are absolutely dismayed at the woke hierarchy, which is driving these diabolical non-crime.
And the majority of them are excellent coppers, right? I mean,
I
this
think
is
they
what's
are.
so annoying.
They are under the cosh of these basically progressive ideologues, much like the government we were describing. But I thought I'd read this one out because this puts the other side, and I think it's really important. And this is from Peter, not his real name. Dear Alison, you have my full sympathy and full support in your troubles with Essex Police and your wider arguments re non-crime hate incidents. I want to offer my personal perspective on a narrower point, though, concerning criticisms of young graduate police officers that often get drawn into these more fundamental debates about freedoms and policing. I think that generalised criticisms are unfair. I have 2 adult daughters who are police constables. Both are graduates from 2 of our best universities. Every day my youngest puts on her boots and a stab vest and goes out to police the streets of a northern town. In all weathers, she takes whatever the nighttime economy, drunks and drug users, the homeless, etc., may throw or spit at her. She is piled into pub fights, chased and caught shoplifters, faced down drunk gangs, dealt with domestics, and confronted men twice her size. My eldest is in the Met. I could spend an hour describing the risky situations that she has been in and her successes in helping bring down serious criminals, playing and winning a 60-mile-an-hour head-on game of chicken with a gang of escaping robbers for starters. My daughters are highly educated modern women. They love and are committed to a tough job. They do it well, and they've got the bruises to prove it. The memory of those bruises will serve them well one day, I hope, says Peter, when they are running the show. Yet for now, all they ever hear in the press is a tidal wave of negativity about the police, including about woke graduates. This undermines them, and I think it increases the risk that they face by encouraging an already fierce anti-police mindset. I'm enormously proud of them, says Peter, and I also worry about them, so I suppose I'm just trying to offer a balancing narrative. We need our police, and I need my girls to be as safe as possible. They would hate to be identified, so I'm writing this with a plea for anonymity. I'll end, Alison, by repeating my huge support for you personally and my pleasure that Essex Police have dropped their investigation.
Brilliant email, and it's so important that good young people aren't discouraged from joining the police. We need, the best of us in our police force. And again, I think the fact that the police is getting a bit of, heavy criticism linked to your case, it's unfortunate because it not only demotivates frontline police that think like we do that what's going on is a bit mad, but it also discourages people from actually joining the police.
I agree, Liam, but I just want to say, having obviously been absorbing all these messages coming in, there is a grave underlying problem with the senior echelons of police. The College of Policing is teaching police that there are these protected characteristics, specific diverse groups that they are supposed to be focused on, and forget the majority.
And we have had emails, haven't we, from sitting judges.
Yeah.
From sitting judges, which of course names we would never, ever disclose. I would go to prison rather than disclose sources like that. People of the ultimate legal expertise in the country on the front line telling us there's a problem. So please don't anyone dismiss what we're saying as ideology and being a bit ranty. We are conveying the views of some of the most serious and senior people in our judiciary on this podcast.
But we are also talking about policemen writing to us saying that most of their training was spent in woke indoctrination, being taught about these protected groups. I personally think that's racist. I don't think it's helpful for broader community cohesion. And I've also been told that because my tweet was deemed to be racist, which is absolutely absurd because it certainly wasn't, but that anything to do with racial hatred suspected would be recorded as a crime, this policeman saying, and there would need to be a criminal investigation. Again, this would hopefully have been proportionate. And this policeman, let's call him Roy, says, the key to this matter, Alison, is having experienced and courageous leaders and decision makers. All it takes is a risk-averse sergeant or inspector, and that is when it goes wrong. They will send their young and inexperienced officers off on fool's errands, like doorstepping Alison Pearson, because they are too scared and unable to make robust decisions themselves. I know, says Roy, from my time, that anything vaguely racist had to be belt and braces, and various senior officers had to have sight of it before it could be closed because they were too cowed by their woke superiors. So that's probably what happened to me, chaps.
This is from Katrina. Firstly, congratulations on your vindication by the police, Alison. I don't know what took them so long. Secondly, thank you to you and Liam for all your hard work on Planet Normal, which I've listened to from the beginning. I regard it as priority listening. It's the highlight of my current affairs week. Thirdly, I've just seen the picture of you celebrating in the Telegraph and how slim you look. So congratulations on that too. You must feel amazing. Fatties, little help. Please carry on. You're a great advocate for common sense, so thank you for standing up for us all. And this is from Jane. Dear Alison and Liam, I know you've had thousands of messages of support, and I hope you don't mind another one clogging up your inbox. I listened to this week's episode, of course, Jane's referring to last week, with a tear in my eye. The strain of what Alison has been through was evident. Well, Jane, recording that episode caused a few tears among your co-pilots as well. Then I saw Liam's post on X, otherwise known as Twitter, and I just knew you were going to be okay. What a dear colleague. This is a nice one about me. And true friend, publicly stands up for you with such a powerful message. You can conquer anything. Can you imagine if I didn't stand up for her? Crikey. Even the dangerous barminess of Essex police. They deny all wrongdoing. We all need a true friend in our life. And if we haven't got one, there's always Planet Normal. Here in the outer reaches of Wales, our women-only swimming sessions include males, but we're not allowed to call them that. The Progress Pride flag flies over our local secondary school for the month of June. The wildlife haven of Skoma, that wonderful island, has a poster telling us the puffins are inclusive, and there's that dreaded rainbow flag proudly displayed. But I cling on to the hope that this will be all over one day. Thank you, Jane, former Planet Normal guest, and very proud of it. Do you remember Jane, Alison, the rowing coach Jane?
Yes, absolutely I do.
Absolutely brilliant.
What's an inclusive puffin colony look like, Halligan? This is...
I've no idea.
These are the mental contortions to which the early part of the 21st century makes us ponder. Joy says she is a devoted Planet Normal addict and a fellow former Sixer of the Pixies. Oh, yes. Now, not everyone's been a Sixer of the Pixies.
I was a Sixer of the Tawnies. We had little brown woggles called the Tawnies.
Dear Alison, I know you have received thousands of messages of support, but I hope you don't mind one more. I'm appalled by what you've been through this last couple of weeks, but pleased that it has garnered so much publicity. If anything good can come out of it, then hopefully it is that, and maybe laws will be changed. What has and is happening to our country? You're a fantastic, courageous journalist. Don't let the bees ground you down. Take time to recover and look after yourself. And Caroline says, I cannot even imagine what you and your family have been through. Thank goodness for your voice. Please keep up the good fight. I know that the vast majority of people in this country are behind you. In the last couple of years, we have had our cars and garage broken into. Having reported all the incidents to the police, they have not once turned up, but asked me if it had affected my mental health. God, sorry. The only thing, says Caroline, affecting my mental health is their incompetence and two-tier policing. You are brave. Thank you, Alison. Well, thank you, Caroline, for that. We got to laugh, Halligan. We got to laugh.
This is Ruth. Dear Alison, I was relieved to hear that Essex Police have dropped the case against you, though whether or not they've learnt from it is debatable with their thought processes having been so corrupted. It's a fight we must all be prepared to wage. I was listening to the Planet Normal podcast at about 5 a.m. when I couldn't sleep and let out a yes when you tore into the abysmal Mateless and Co. Emily and her fellow newsagents deny wrongdoing. It gave me so much pleasure. Sad creature that I am. Keep going if you can bear it. Brackets, presenting with Liam. So many of us are behind you. That's from Ruth.
And this is from Frank, a philosopher and author. I realise you have had many messages of support and sympathy, says Frank. I should like to add my own. The way you've been treated is monstrous and shows what sinister times we now live in. I'm afraid the beginning of this incursion on free speech started some time ago, even in the 1980s, with the neo-Marxist project of so-called anti-racism. During the 1980s, I was a member of a think tank of academics formed by the great Roger Scruton. In 1986, we published a book of essays, of which I was the editor, entitled Anti-Racism, an Assault on Education and Value, which warned of the attack on our civilization and the increasing curbs on free speech. Despite massive publicity and a warm reception, the warnings were not heeded, and even Mrs. Thatcher's government did nothing about it. The long march through the institutions of neo-Marxism is now almost complete. I wish you well with your battle, Alison, and I'm sorry for the distress it's caused you, and that's kind regards, Frank. And Celia says, you probably won't read this. Oh, we are reading it, Celia. But if you do, please, you must not be afraid. You know you have done nothing wrong. Fear is a weapon that authoritarian organisations use to subject people, hence your early morning police callers on a day of rest and national remembrance. We are all behind you and with you, but please stand firm and refuse to be intimidated. See it for what it is, not an attack on you, but an attack on free speech. You are the strong, articulate one, the clever one with words. The pen is indeed mightier than the sword. And you like this, Halligan?
Here we go. Whenever you say that, you're about to insult me. Go on.
No, it's not about you for once. Bill says, it's so deeply unfunny what's happened to Alison that I have to ask whether it's a crime to hate non-crime hate incidents.
Oh, God,
Bill, that's a joke. They'll be banning those soon, darling. So just keep getting them in. We've got to get as many laughs in, Halligan, before little Yvette, the mirthless munchkin, bans us from having a laugh.
My co-pilot's actually referring to the Home Secretary of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, one of the four great officers of state in this fine country.
Who denies all wrongdoing.
Who denies wrongdoing. This is from Fiona. We've got 2 poems to end. Bob the Bard, eat your heart out. I tell you what, Bob the Bard, he's plenty of people giving him a run for his money, actually.
Actually, Giles has asked, could we have a Christmas compilation of Bob the Bard as a toilet book? So that's something
We
to
could have a
ponder,
little
isn't it?
stocking filler of Planet Normal Poets, couldn't we? And emails. That would be fun. That would be fun. This is from Fiona. I was very pleased to read in the Telegraph, Essex Police have dropped their case against you. Most relieved. There's no doubt lockdown encouraged this overzealous behaviour. Where I live, in March 2021, says Fiona, 4 elderly ladies had a cup of tea in the communal gardens of their sheltered housing complex. What followed is in my poem below, with which I think you will sympathise. I always enjoy your column, Alison. Don't be too careful. Tea for 4, with a nod to John Betjeman, of course, our former poet laureate. Springtime sun is wanly shining, and an eager blackbird sings by a sheltered housing complex in suburban Charlton Kings. Through the faded white net curtains, prying eyes begin to snoop on 4 old and lonely neighbours in a socially distanced group. Gone that lengthy lockdown winter without friends or family, they decided to foregather for a nice hot cup of tea. As they gossiped, all excited, they saw not the curtains twitch of a rather nosy neighbour who decided she would snitch. In the mind of uninvited Muriel in 24, sparks of dormant ire ignited when she saw them break the law. This old lady, bored and jealous, caused the police to seem like fools. They were somewhat overzealous when enforcing COVID rules. 10 to 10 while watching telly, Mabel had a sudden shock. She was shaking like a jelly, answering the policeman's knock. Vandals might be running riot. Mabel's in her dressing gown. Filled with sobering disquiet, Mabel gets a dressing down. Ta-da! Brilliantly put together. I mean, we're professional writers, Alison. The complexity in the use of language there, the rhythm of it, really, really brilliant. Names are imaginary, Fiona reassures us.
And a very deft nod, Fiona, to the great Muriel Spark there. Before we have our final poem, I thought this was good from Adrian. I thought you may find this ironic, says Adrian. My 18-year-old nephew was robbed at knife point by 3 men on his way home from school near Lee Station in Essex last Friday after school. Thankfully, he wisely handed over his phone and bank card and was unharmed, albeit very scared. Once the robbers left, my nephew managed to get access to a phone and called the police. However, their response was frankly unbelievable. They told him it was no longer an emergency and he should call 101. It would appear they are too busy to even make contact as yet, let alone perhaps look in the area for 3 men at the time of the incident. So if anyone else was robbed that afternoon, Essex police aren't interested. Who knows? Maybe 2 policemen will eventually attend my nephew's address as they did with Alison's. We are not holding our breath. Your questions for the Chief Constable in today's Telegraph may never be answered, but maybe the bright light may make them feel uncomfortable at least. Well done you for calling it out. We are very pleased your ridiculous charge was dropped. So that, Liam, was a robbery at knife point with a young man in our county where the police didn't bother to show up. So another result for Essex police, who deny all wrongdoing. And finally, there really is no occasion so dreadful that Planet Normal listeners can't come up with a poem on it. Pauline says, Dear Alice and Liam, I used to write poems years ago when anyone left work, always a bit rude and cheeky. Oh, watch out, Pauline, non-crime, hate incident. I just could not resist writing about Alison's ordeal. I kept it clean, though. Hope I don't offend Bob the Bard. I love listening to his poems. Here we go, says Pauline. Thank you for your wonderful Planet Normal. I've been with you right from the beginning. You both kept me sane through the COVID debacle and still do keep me sane. Thank you.
While driving each other crazy.
Exactly. We'll just take you on for the team. That's it, And this is Pauline's poem, which is titled Non-Crime Hate Incident. Police, they catch criminals. Oh, no, they do not. They prefer the non-crimes and so sets in the rot. Catching naughty criminals brings them no kudos. Non-crimes curry favour with their wokey boss. Oh, here we go. Are you going to do the chorus? Non-crimes, they are the best. Non-crimes, forget all the rest. Our resources are finite. Real crimes take too much time. So let us take the easy path and solve the hate non-crimes. Find an innocent target. Knock on Sunday, it's double pay. Tell them of their misdemeanour and completely ruin their day. Chorus, Harrigan.
Non-crimes,
they are the best.
Non-crimes,
forget all the rest.
We're really through the looking glass here. Carry on.
Such an easy target. Police rub their hands in glee. Another successful non-crime. So much easier, don't you see? We could make the non-crime a crime. Mulling it over with a cup of tea. So much better than real criminals. We'll score with the lefties. That is key. Non-crimes, they are the best. Non-crimes, forget all the rest. Got the wrong one this time, did not think it through, sparked a global outrage, been caught out, what a to-do. Don't mess with Alison and Elon, get out before it's too late.
Oh, the pain.
Time to drop the non-crime hate, get out now, just don't wait. Oh, we're going to do the chorus again.
Go on then.
Non-crimes, they are the best. Non-crimes, forget all the rest. Remember, we, the taxpayer, pay your wages every day. We, the silent majority, will stand up and defend our way. Policing is by consent, you know. We do not consent to this disgrace. Do the job we pay you for, catching criminals and keeping us safe. Oh, was a final twist in the last chorus.
Solving crimes. That is the best. Non-crimes, we all detest. And on that bombshell, that's it from Planet Normal for another week as we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason, our flying refuge of reasoned views. Alison, email of the week. What a choice.
Oh.
It's in your hands. It's in your hands.
No, I mean, no, because I'm absolutely humbled and thrilled by everyone's fantastic emails. What are we going to do? We're going to have 2 mugs. I'm unilaterally declaring. So Annalise for her beautiful, touching email, and to Pauline for a poem that captures the absurdity of non-crimes. And I'd just like to promise Planet Normal listeners that while I am going to get non-crime hate incidents removed from national life, we shall not mention the Alison Pearson fracas debacle for some time until my solicitors report back with more findings.
I suspect that isn't actually true. So, Annalise and Pauline, send us an email to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk, put in the subject heading mug winner. Give us your postal address and you will get your Planet Normal mug.
And as we speed away from our beloved Planet Normal and the madness of planet Earth comes back into view, thanks as ever to our producers, Isabel Boujar, Cass Ho and Louisa Wells. And thanks especially to Cass and Izzy for assembling all the wonderful emails. Stay safe and stay in touch with us and with each other, because God knows we need each other right now.
Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
And just before we go, Alison and I want to highlight this year's Telegraph Christmas Charity Appeal. This year, the Telegraph's raising money for 4 charities: Teenage Cancer Trust, Alzheimer's Research UK, the Army Benevolent Fund, and Humanity and Inclusion. All of them fantastic causes. And this coming Sunday, December the 1st, it really is almost December, myself and the co-pilot will be at the Telegraph from 11 a.m, where, along with other columnists, we'll be taking calls from readers who'd like to donate to one or all of our 4 chosen charities over the phone using debit cards. Alison and I will be at the Telegraph all day, Sunday, December the 1st, taking calls. All the details are under a link in the show notes to this episode. Give us a call this coming Sunday and you'll get to speak to a Telegraph columnist, and if your luck runs out, it could even be one of us.